Hey y'all, it's Savannah with Plant Savvy, and today I want to show y'all how we repot some plants. We're going to go from small, medium, largest so you can kind of see how we do it. It's the same technique for all of them. It just obviously will get harder as we, move up the ranks with different techniques and how we do stuff. But let's go ahead and get into it. First, I'm going to lay down a tarp. They make smaller ones of these. I just had this one on me, so that's what we're going to do. You can also lay down like a box, I've seen people use like door mats for your shoes, whatever you want to use, or you can just do it outside, whatever works best for you. Okay, so let's start off with just a little simple 4-incher. These are some of the easier guys to repot. We could go as low as 2 inches as well. I can show you how we do that, but that's pretty simple. Usually they just pop right out. To start with a 4-inch, how you know it needs to be repotted is a good start. A lot of times with houseplants, you don't necessarily need to repot as often as you would think. If you are having to water it a lot, like every day, every other day, and it's becoming a problem, or you could see, the roots are coming out of the bottom, or maybe you see them wrapping around on the top, or you're noticing that it's just too much roots to soil, and usually when that happens, it's causing more maintenance with watering and that kind of stuff. So that's usually a good sign to repot. And also, if you're starting to lose a lot of leaves and you're not sure why, the times that we typically repot is spring and fall, but because these are interior plants and they are kind of in a more stable temperatured situation, they usually don't go dormant that often. You just don't want to repot a plant when it's dormant. And basically dormancy means it's not actively growing. So without further ado, let's get into it. So usually we'll take a plant and we'll lay it down as gently as possible. And that goes for any size plant. You want to make sure that you're being careful with the foliage and whatnot. But remember that, plants are pretty resilient and they can survive. So if you do lose a leaf or two during the process, don't freak out about it. It will grow back. So what we'll then do is towards the bottom of the pot, I'll kind of put some pressure on the end and then slowly turn it over, again being careful about the foliage, and then again pressing down once more and then moving along like that. What you'll do then, you should have loosened it from the pot, or that motion should have loosened it from the pot, and then you should be able to just gently tug and it will come out. As you can see, this plant holds all of its roots, all of its soil in there, so it obviously probably needs to be repotted. I've been having to water this probably 3 times a week. We are in a greenhouse situation, so it will be more, but definitely needs to repot. So next what I'll do is find a good nursery pot. You can plant directly in decorative planters. You just want to make sure that it has drainage, especially if you're just starting out. I do have some plants and planters in my house that don't have drainage, but I just water a very specific way. So next is choosing the right pot size. A lot of times people go too big a pot size or don't go big enough. Rule of thumb is usually about 1 to 2 inches. You want to take the old planter, place it inside the new one, and see how much space there is in between these two, and that will be a good indication that you need to up pot. This is a good size range. So this is a 4 to a 6 inch. That's usually about, typically in commercial growers, that's usually about how they go. So not that big of a size difference, but if it can fit directly in there, you should be good to go with just some room on the side. You don't want to go too big. If you go too big, then you're more likely to overwater your plant and cause root rot. And that's just because there's too much soil to the root system, and it will cause just water to pool at the bottom, and that can lead to root rot. So don't want to go too big. Let's move on. So a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about soil. When it comes to your own plant journey, you can do whatever you want, but usually when I first get people started, I usually try to tell them to choose a soil that's a little bit better than what you might find at like a big box store, like a Home Depot or something like that. The soil is where everything begins. That's where your plant health resides. If your soil is not sufficient, you don't have the nutrients, the macro and micronutrients within that soil that you need, your plant, no matter how much sun it's getting, how much light it's getting, it's not going to thrive. In order to set them up for success, I usually say that you want to try to choose a soil that's a little bit better than, obviously what you'll find at a big box store. We really like pondering. This is a local supplier here for us. It's called Earth Mix. They make local compost and a bunch of other stuff that we really like. We also really like Fox Farm, and Fox Farm, you can usually find those at local garden centers around you. But we usually try to choose a local company, but you know, if we can't find that, Fox Farm usually works as well. Just want to do something a little bit step up than just having perlite and some coco coir. Within your soil though, you want to make sure that you have some ingredients, drainage ingredients with your recipe, like orchid bark, perlite, even, you know, small rocks, sand, depending on the type of plant. Every plant is a little bit different, but usually for tropical plants, you can just go for a nice chunky aeroid mix. Again, you want to make sure it has different attributes in there and it's not just coco coir. A lot of times at big box stores, they will be just directly planted in coco coir soil, which means there's no added drainage. And the reason why they do that is because in greenhouses, it gets really, really hot. And so to lower the amount of times that they have to water, they'll keep it in a very slow draining mix like just coco coir. So when you bring something like that into an indoor setting, a plant that's planted directly in coco coir, you're more likely to have overwatering because that soil just holds in that moisture so easily. So if you do bring a plant home and it is in a soil mix like that, you might want to switch out the mix or just change how much you're watering and make sure that you're checking the soil before you decide to water. I can show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So in this mix, these are slow release pellets, but as you can see, everything else in here, this is just strictly a nice coco coir mix. There's no added drainage or anything, and these pellets right here are just slow release fertilizer. Compared to something that's like this, it's got, you know, rocks, orchid bark. It's different to where it creates air pockets within the soil, so it's less likely to hold in as much moisture as something like this. Once you got your nice soil together, let's go ahead and pot her up. So usually what I'll do is take the pot that you're going to pot. You can wear gloves. My hands are dirty all the time, so it doesn't really matter. Put a nice light layer in the bottom. Not too much. You don't want it to sit too high out of its pot. You can kind of see the level where you want it to sit. I like to leave like, you know, 1/2 inch to 1 inch around the lip of the pot, just so when I do water, it doesn't overflow or anything like that. Light layer, and then the rest of the soil, fill around the edges. And this is an important part. You don't want to squish your plant down in there. You don't want to squeeze it down in there because that ruins the beautiful air pockets that you've just created that allows water to soak through evenly, as well as allows, again, airflow to the root system, which is really important because like out in the wild, you know, you've got plants outside that, you know, in the soil, they've got little bugs and organisms and worms that crawl up and down collecting food and bringing it back into their burrows. And that creates this like natural air pockets within that system, so water can flow down and it's not compacted. You don't want it to be compacted or it's not going to water properly and your plant health is not going to be as happy. So what I do instead, just give it a little tap on the sides to make sure everything's secure. And then, you know, you can do a little light taps here and there to make sure it's good. And that's how you repot a plant. Depending on the situation that you are repotting this plant in, because I just up-potted it and it's happy, it wasn't overwatered or anything like that, I am gonna go ahead and give it a drink now that it's in its new home to help it establish quicker. And one last thing, if you do see, after you repot, remember we are taking this plant from its old home into its new home, so it might shock it or stress it out a little bit. You all know how moving can be. So I think if you do lose a couple leaves or two, that's normal, so don't stress out too much about it. Now, if you're losing like all of the plant leaves, then there might be a situation. You might want to look into that. Could be something else happening, like overwatering or something. Maybe you took off too much root system, which brings me to, let's go to a medium-sized plant and I can show you how we kind of keep plants in their same pot sizes if you wanted to keep them in the same pot size. This isn't necessarily something I would do for this specific plant, but for, you know, example, I will show you how we would go about keeping a plant in its same pot size, especially if you want to keep it in the same spot or in the same pot, whatever that is. Obviously, this guy needs a repot. What we'll do is, I'm seeing the plant and I'm like, I feel like I need to split it. I'm gonna split it. Put that in a 4-inch And then from here, what we'll like to do is you can cut off a bit of the roots. And what that does is leave room for more, you can pot it right in the same pot, but also keep the integrity of the plant. This is just an alcohol to disinfect my shears. You don't want to cut more than 1/3 of the roots. So you don't want to go up on here to something like this, or that will really greatly shock this plant. You'd want to probably hit it about like right here, just to give it, you know, a little bit of space. But what I'll do is just go straight in. And this has a little edge on it, and that's how I can cut into it. But you can literally take a saw, whatever you want, and just go in and cut off that bottom half. Snake plants are soil eaters, so a lot of times just topping off the soil does fine. It's because of all their rhizomes. Eee. Yay! Check this guy out. Waist wear. Joe body tee. Okay. I think I'm just gonna split it right down the middle. Fuck. Dude, I just stabbed myself. Oh, there's a hole, bro. Shit, bro. Ow.